start the record. All right, so thanks everyone for joining us today on this very warm Thursday, December 16th. So this is the first of what we're calling our network-wide exchange calls. Some of you may have participated in the past in what we were calling our COVID-19 task force calls that we were hosting for the first 6 to 8 months of the pandemic. And now we have a new strategic plan for the state and a new farm to plate network structure. And so as a part of that, what we're going to be doing probably every quarter at least, is hosting one of these calls, which is just an open invitation, open opportunity to share across different topic areas in the food system, and also get updates from our wonderful federal delegation staff. So kind of adopting some things that we had done during the pandemic, and now we're just transitioning into this new network structure. And so happy that this is the first of what will be many of these network-wide exchange calls. And so let me I did want to just quickly share, just as a reminder of in reference to what I'm talking about when I talk about the new network structure. So bear with me as I'm going to share my screen really quickly. And then after I do that, we will have some updates from the federal staff on a number of issues that I'm sure are of interest and people want to know more about. Then we'll turn to the Agency of Ag to get some state level perspective. Then we've got a couple of folks that I've talked to beforehand, Nofa Vermont, Farm to School, that will also be giving updates. And a lot of, I think for this call, just given the time of year, seems like a lot of policy focus with the legislative year coming about and just what's happening at the federal level as well. So, and then we'll also open the floor up. Oh, hold on, I gotta move. There we go. Life in a pandemic means your kids might be around. Yeah, and then we'll have an open period for folks to also just share what's happening for their organization or put out requests or questions. And yeah, and that will be it. We'll see what we can get to in this hour and a half that we have. So now let me just very quickly share my screen if I can find the right screen to share. 1 second. Let's see. All right. Oh, here we go. Sorry. All right. Here we go. All right. So just a very, very brief run through of what I'm talking about with the sort of this new structure and this network-wide exchange and where that fits in. So real quick recap. Back in 2011, the first Farm to Plate strategic plan was put out. So we had, on the left-hand side is kind of the framework we approached things from, which was this soils to soil model. And then we built the Farm to Plate network off of that to implement the plan over time, over the first 10 years of Farm to Plate. And so that's the original network diagram is that image on the right. And so we have working groups, cross-cutting teams, task forces, and a steering committee. And all of those things were built around these leverage points in the system that had been identified, as well as leverage points in the plan. And so we have a new plan, and with that, a new structure. So needing to kind of adapt how we work together as a network, and just acknowledging that things now are not the same as they used to be, although there are certainly trends that are similar, but may need new approaches and new ways of kind of coming at the problem or the opportunity. And the new plan is really built around what are 34 priority strategies. And with that, we have a category, a group type called priority strategy teams. We also have communities of practice, which are groups of people with kind of a specialized knowledge in a certain area of the food system that we want to create space for helping them come together as a community to learn more, to be better, to share resources. And then there are these topic exchanges, which are somewhat similar to what we called working groups in the last iteration, more open places for people to come together, dive into a particular topic area, share, network, connect with one another, and build connections that will likely live outside of that group. So really the dividing line between these three types is the strategy teams are very action oriented. They're tied to a very specific priority strategy from the plan. Communities of practice are built around a particular area of practice in the food system. And then topic exchanges are really about information exchange. And I won't go through this whole list, but just to know that we have identified various strategy teams. We have identified various communities of practice, which are carryovers from the last network. And then we have a number of 5 topic exchanges, and then a 6th, which is this one, the full network exchange. So again, just providing this opportunity to bring all of the network members together to have a global perspective of what's happening, and through that hopefully also facilitate more cross-cutting connections and partnerships, and just that level of awareness and how it informs people's decision making, that this is just another opportunity to connect the system together. So broadly, that's what we're talking about. And Kelly will be and then this is just a schematic of kind of how we see these things interacting with each other. So priority strategy teams will be providing updates in the exchanges. What happens in the exchanges will go back down to the priority strategy level. And then all of those teams will have this opportunity to be at meeting in the network-wide exchange. So I'm gonna now just stop the share. And so what we've done is we've put out a survey for folks to take to what we're interested in, kind of what people are interested in participating in, the types of groups that they want to be a part of. And something I didn't mention is for the topic exchanges, we're looking to identify people who are open to helping curate and put together these meetings. And so it's also an opportunity for folks to express an interest in serving in that role as well. And so, yeah, please, if you haven't already, take the survey, let us know what you're interested in. And this is going to be really helpful for us in how we do our outreach and start to convene these groups in 2022. And a lot of this too will also be coinciding with the launch of our new website in 2022. So that is the quick primer of the new network and kind of the context for what we're here for today. And so with that, as I mentioned, we're going to start with some federal updates, and then we'll move kind of to the state level, and then we'll move to some individual organizational updates, and always, as always, opportunity for discussion, questions. Please do not hesitate to use that in the chat, and I will identify those questions as they come up and try to queue those up to the appropriate people or person. And so with that, I'm gonna turn it over to, I'll go to Tom, and then I'll let Tom kind of direct traffic with the rest of the congressional staff. So thanks, Tom.
Thank you. And well, we have about 15 minutes, did you say?
Yeah.
Okay, just like to be sensitive to that if I can. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I know we have, I think, Andrew, Haley, and Chris on the call as well. I'm going to dive into the FY22 and FY23 appropriation status and process first, and then hand off to others to look at Build Back Better, the infrastructure bill, or whatever else might be out there of interest. So just kind of launching right into it. Senator Leahy will chair the Senate Appropriations Committee for one more appropriation cycle only. We're at this point on the FY22 appropriation cycle with a continuing resolution funding the federal government until the middle of February, when we have strong expectations. Senator Leahy is committed to adopting appropriations bills rather than funding a full year on a continuing resolution. This is the first year in 10 that we've had, in 10 years that we've had congressionally directed spending, previously known as earmarks. And many of the folks on this call participated in projects, in proposing projects to one or more of the congressional offices. And I can, where those stand now, for those who are tracking projects for congressionally directed spending projects for FY22, they're tied up, of course, with the FY22 bills in the CR, but the senator has posted on his website those projects that have moved forward through the Senate process thus far. And if they're in the Senate bill at this point, it's strongly likely they will be on the final bill. Real quickly, those projects that are in the bill that are of interest to this group, I'll just blaze through them real quick. As much for examples of what might be considered in FY23, we do have another cycle to go. So to plant some seeds, but also of interest, there's a $5 million Farmland Futures Fund with the Vermont Land Trust to help with farm transitions, getting farmers on the land on their own farms. The Dairy Innovation Center is fully funded. Northeast Dairy Innovation Center is fully funded in the Ag Bill. Food Systems Research Center at the University of Vermont, and I would direct people there to collaborate with researchers from USDA and University of Vermont, is funded again, and that's really a growing operation, so avail yourselves of that. There's a $3 million project for the Retreat Farm to stand up a food venture center. The Yellow Barn project, a lot of you are familiar with, is in at $925,000. The Maple Sugar Makers have some funding in there to help with a certification program. And there's $5 million for a Farm to School Institute to be fully and permanently established at Shelburne Farms. Also in that bill, we're tracking the issue around hemp and CBD and the fact that the current rules put out by the USDA subsequent to the 2018 Farm Bill create a very difficult process for those involved in those products to really be able to certify compliance. And so the senator's trying to, in the bill, has drafted language that would again extend the period in which we can work under state rather than the USDA rules for another year. That's not by any means a given. It's something he's working on in the bill, but has not yet achieved, and of course the bills have not passed. And so that's just a real quick sketch of the food system related projects in those bills. And as a lead-in, we're beginning at the staff level to organize and figure out how to handle FY23. In FY22, it was a huge flurry of activity. We had about 2 weeks in May to gather all of our projects, and then maybe 2 weeks to review the 400 or so projects that came into our office. And I know it wasn't much different in the other two offices. This year, we're hoping to get more lead time on it to help organize fewer but more substantial projects for big impact, at least in our office. And so if you are looking at potentially coming in with a FY23 congressional directed spending request, talk to your friendly neighborhood staffer early and think about larger projects that you can collaborate potentially with other organizations on versus a smaller project that may have an impact, but we're just not going to be in a position to move hundreds and hundreds of projects forward. And so for significant impact, we're looking at fewer, bigger projects this year, hopefully. So stay tuned on that. We'll have more information posted on the senator's website by early next year, I would guess, and go from there. With that, I'll yield the floor, maybe to bounce it back and forth between offices if Senator Sanders' office wants to come on. I think we're going to talk about the Build Back Better bill potentially.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris. I work for Senator Sanders on the Senate Budget Committee as his agricultural policy advisor. I do have to run in about 10 minutes to talk about this very bill. So, if you have any questions that I'm unable to answer here, Haley will take them. If she's not able to answer, just, forward them to me. I'll drop my email here in the chat before I go. Which is all to say, at this moment, there is a significant chunk of that legislation that goes directly to ag. It's about a little more than $90 billion. And I think quite a substantial amount of that would be able to benefit Vermont. We're looking at conservation programs that we're trying to plus up. There's a lot in there for child nutrition. There's about $10 billion to expand the community eligibility provision, as well as summer EBT for 2 years. We are always still hoping that we can make those things last longer. I think the longer, especially when it comes to child nutrition, the longer that we can make those run, the better data that we can gather to make, ideally to make these things permanent in the future. But as it stands, we have everything sort of extended within the 10-year budget window. And it's always going to be a work in progress. Our goal is not with some summer EBT, for instance, to get to the end of the funding in 2 years and say that's it. Our goal is going to be to continue to work on that, to continue to make those programs permanent. And I think other than that, the largest bucket in the ag space, at least, would be for forestry, which is mostly about wildfire prevention, those sort of issues, which I'm happy to take questions on that as well. But I think there's other things here that might be of interest to most folks on this call. And as far as the progress we're making, I'm sure everybody, I don't know if everyone's as glued to the media as we are here, but you do hear stories about the constant delays and setbacks that we continue to face. And a lot of that is true, but that doesn't mean we aren't making progress. I think we are in a pretty good position, at least with the parliamentarian. We always want to be moving, I think, a little bit quicker than we are. Our boss's perspective is that we should have started on this back in, March, April, May, so that we wouldn't be here in December, continue to working on this. But this is where we are. But I think we're committed. I think, the entire congressional delegation is committed to seeing this through. And if not by the end of this year, then we're going to come back and continue working at the beginning of next year. And we're just going to keep working, keep going back until we get it done. So, and once we do, as our boss says quite frequently, it will be the most transformative piece of legislation since at least the Great Society, if not the New Deal. So a lot of good things coming. And like I said, happy to take questions or pass it on to Congressman Welch's office.
And I'll just jump in and say a quick hello. My name is Haley Para, and I work in Senator Sanders' Burlington office. I'm the Senator's outreach director and spend most of my time working on energy and environmental issues, so I've crossed paths with some of you there. I'm just temporarily covering ag outreach, but we will have a new staff member on board on January 3rd, someone I think who may be familiar to a number of you. We haven't formally announced them yet, but I'll be sure to introduce you to all of them. And I think that's it from our office. I don't know if Andrew wants to take the floor from here.
That's a pretty good summary. I guess I'll just add that prior to work on the Build Back Better Act, Congress did also enact some pretty broad sweeping spending bills. So I'm sure, as everyone has seen, USDA continues to push out various programs funded through ARPA and CARES Act and the end of the year omnibus. So I guess, without listing all of them, those are still ongoing. Most recently, a rural development loan guarantee program aimed at the middle of the supply chain, the food supply chain, that I'm sure is of interest to this group, but many more on down the line from the top to the bottom. So I guess be in touch about those as you go through them, and we'll do our best to kind of keep circulating those programs of interest. But there are a lot of balls in the air, both enacted and, as Chris and Tom outlined, some pretty big, exciting opportunities. The good news on BBB, I guess.
I was on a webinar, just some others on this call may have joined earlier today regarding a USDA program for local food purchases, block grants to the states for local food purchase and distribution. Not a huge program for Vermont, but there's some money there if it's a fit.
Yeah. So anyway, not to lose sight of the dollars that are already going out the door. I guess the good news on BBB is that the remaining portions of the bill, and maybe I'm being too optimistic, Chris, that are still at an impasse with a small number of senators that we need not name, do not appear to be portions of the ag title. So, the bill as written, I think, if it were enacted today, would be largely as is, and that's pretty exciting for Vermont. Just the level of funding on a lot of programs important to our work.
Great, thank you all. And is Ryan on the call? I don't think he is. Okay. So we've got opportunity here for questions about anything you heard or anything you maybe heard prior about building back better, and as Andrew I think was talking about too, just anything that's kind of already in circulation. So I'm gonna hold space for a couple of minutes for folks to you can offer up those questions up into the chat, or if you raise your hand, I can also identify you in that way. And Eric DeLuca, I think that's a question there. So any comments on the state small business credit initiative from ARPA and its potential impact on food businesses and employee ownership? Anyone want to tackle that?
I don't have an answer for that, but I'd be happy to check with our person who works on small business, just because it probably lives a little more in their wheelhouse, and follow up with that person.
Great. Okay, and then we've got Graham says, having a lot of impact on our communities and ally communities across the country will also be the voting rights bill. Okay, any word on those pieces of legislation?
On voting rights?
Yeah.
There is a big push. Senator Leahy, of course, is a senior member of the Judiciary Committee to pass voting rights legislation. It seems as if an agreement that would allow that to be done is elusive at this point.
Okay, I'm gonna couple more minutes on the questions for staff. And as we are waiting maybe for a few more questions, just so yeah, curious on the legislative timeline for building back better. Will there be a point in time where it's either like where we will know if something's going to happen or not, or is that still sort of just too hard to determine at this stage?
I mean, I think we're closer to the end than we are to the beginning. I can say that. Like I said, we're in the process now where we're actually in sort of the final stages of going through the bird bath and making sure that everything is sort of compliant with what the parliamentarian will need. And it's just a question of getting through that and then getting it through the floor, making sure that negotiations with those other senators who have concerns are finalized. But I think there's no question, I think we could have met the December 25th deadline if there was a final agreement. But, you know, if we do end up going into 2022, you know, I think we could get it done pretty quickly, actually. Which is also just to say, like, in terms of a firm timeline, I have no idea.
Yeah,
It changes, you know, constantly.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I know providing a firm answer is near impossible, but that's helpful, just even having some context for, yeah, just a sense of expectation. And then we've got a question.
And just
Yeah,
to
go ahead,
Graham's
Andrew. Yep.
Graham's question, you know, I'm sure, and maybe this is what prompted it, but there has been some news that in the Senate, at least, we may be tabling the Build Back Better stuff for the next week to try and focus on voting rights and reach an agreement there. You know, you'd hope we can do both, but as Tom also said, I guess agreement on both remains elusive, but I think, you know, as it becomes more and more clear that BBB might kick into next year, I think there's going to be, well, senators are still here prior to the holidays, there may be a big push on voting rights on the floor next week, but we'll have to see. It's hour by hour at this point.
Okay, thanks for that additional context, Andrew. And I'm going to take, so we've got two more questions. We're going to take those and then we'll transition to Agency of Ag and State of Vermont updates. So one was coming from Molly Anderson, who was curious about when funds become available for conservation projects in Vermont, when and where will they be announced? And she's especially wondering about agroforestry money.
Yeah, couple of easier questions now. I would remind folks there are dollars available on an ongoing basis, as Andrew made the point. We've put a lot of money in play, a lot of programs in play already, and we have the background Farm Bill program. So always look for what's out there now. And the conservation, the big shot in the arm for conservation in the Build Back Better bill are primarily within existing programs that flow out through USDA, mostly Natural Resource Conservation Service. So stay in touch with your local NRCS office and watch for those opportunities. Let them know what your interests are, and that they would flow into the programs that we're familiar with there largely, not entirely, but that's will be. The local food assistance purchase program I see as a question, and having just come off a webinar, I can say that there's a block grant amount available to the state, and it's a matter of the state of Vermont, which can work with partners, submitting an application for those funds and for the local food purchase. And I know that the state's tracking this closely.
And then now some more questions are rolling in, and I don't want to cut those short because I think they're all good. So Stephanie Walsh, DFA, was asking about, and I think there's some other curiosity about this as well. So have Farm Bill discussions started yet? So recognizing all the ag appropriations and the various spending bills and wanting to advocate for inclusion in the Farm Bill, what will your offices need from us in Vermont in 2022 to help inform those discussions?
To the first part of the question, we do expect that formal Farm Bill proceedings will start likely early next year. What that'll mean is like the issue area hearings by the committees. Marker bill is starting to daylight. So, conversations have not yet begun through formal processes. This reconciliation bill is one reason for that. Just the typical cycle is the other. Conversations like this are a good way to start informing those. We expect to start getting a lot of outreach from groups like DFA in advance of those, and especially as the hearing calendar starts to become known. I think if passed as prologue, there will be hearings on the conservation title, the RD title, commodity programs, et cetera. So I think as those start to hit the schedule, that, you know, if not before then, that will be a good juncture to really ramp up outreach to our offices for sure, and others that you're in touch with.
Yeah, is just as a quick follow-up on that, Andrew, yeah, is there any way just when that schedule is known to like send that to me and then I can send it out through the network? Because that, I mean, that's the type of
Yep.
information that I think oftentimes people miss, you know, just even the scheduling of things at this level. So that'd be great if we could coordinate some of that.
Yeah, for sure. And to be clear, I mean, the way this usually works is next year, you know, 2022 will be a lot of the kind of debate framing and posturing, maybe some early drafts toward the end of the year. And then we have the midterms and then who knows, but generally, you know, you don't start to see an actual bill come together until the year that the current farm bill expires, which in this case is 2023. But I will just add, without getting too heady here, you know, the stakes for this farm bill are already quite high. If you know, for this group needs not to being said, but you know, will be even higher if this Build Back Better Act does pass, because of course that's a 10-year bill. Not all of that money gets spent in year one. And so the next farm bill, as Tom said, I mean, most of the funding in the reconciliation bill necessarily has to be routed through existing, you know, in this case, USDA programs. And so a lot of those dollars will be influenced by any changes made in the upcoming farm bill. So it's a little bit like we're writing a huge check, probably the biggest one since like the Dust Bowl for conservation programs outside of a farm bill. And then this upcoming farm bill is going to determine how a lot of those dollars end up being spent in the long run. So anyway, important farm bill.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's, I guess for the wonky amongst us, that's a good piece of information. Yeah, so thanks for that. And just so last, I'm gonna cut this now as the last thing. And I think the question has been answered, but I just wanted to give, I think, Haley an opportunity to clarify. So Mariah had asked about USDA MS Farm Food Worker Relief Funding. And I think Haley, you were responding to that by saying the allocation is 500,000. Is that correct?
Actually, I was saying that in regards to the other program,
Okay.
That Tom had kind of talked about, the webinar he was on, where there'll be allocations to the state. I believe for the Farm and Food Worker Relief Program, but Andrew and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's broader eligibility, and I see they do have a call for applications at that link that Mariah provided, and more details about kind of the various amounts that are available.
Great.
Yeah, and I think the initial hit that's with USDA right now is 20 million. Haley, does that sound right? But then in the Build Back Better Act, you know, that's kind of a pilot program that Congress has already enacted, and then Build Back Better Act has an additional $200 million for that program. So hopefully another big shot in the arm for that important work.
Great. Excellent. Okay, we are going to transition. Thank you, Haley, Tom, Andrew, and Chris before he left. Really always appreciate it. Just tremendous amount of perspective and knowledge that I think comes with you all being here. So thanks. And yeah, and also Chris shared his info. So if folks have additional questions, feel free to send those to him. And we will now transition to the Agency of Ag, which my apologies, I think it's Laura, I'm going to turn to you, but oh, Abby, no, Abby is on the call. I wasn't sure if Abby Willard was going to be on the call. So Abby, I'll turn to you, and then I know there's other agency staff too on the call. So there's a lot, I think, to cover and share potentially with what's happening at the state level and the Agency of Ag. So Abby, go ahead.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, we just jumped from a Future of Ag Commission meeting, so I wasn't here and I didn't know how long it would go. So I'm happy to be very brief, since we do have lots of Ag Dev staff and Agency of Agriculture staff on the call. So yeah, this time of year is interesting, both on the state front, the legislative preparation, and then federal time. So this is a big time of year for the Ag Development Division in launching and making funding decisions around our various funding opportunities. So whether that's working lands or farm to school, final decisions around specialty crop block grants, trade show assistance grants, and the various other funding opportunities coming out of the Agency of Agriculture, as well as the Dairy Business Innovation Center for the Northeast region that's managed out of the agency. So it's a busy time of year. If you don't receive our weekly Ag Dev e-newsletter that comes out every Sunday, let us know or reach out so that we can make sure that you have access to that, since those are a great location to receive updates and information about our funding opportunities, but other efforts and dollars and opportunities across Vermont Ag. It's also a time when we're putting together and finalizing our legislative priorities and budget asks to the legislature. So we actually did that back in September, but usually the months of October and November are negotiation times and conversations with the governor's office about what the priorities look like. Anson was just describing to the Future of Ag Commission how unusual this year is, and therefore why there's a bit of a delay in communicating what the priorities are around budgets this year. And that has to do with the fact that we usually have a general fund budget that gets negotiated and capital bill that looks at infrastructure needs, but there's also ARPA, and there's a state surplus this year, and there's unspent federal resources at the state. So it's a really complex year for budgeting. And so as a result, we are and probably will continue to see a delay in budget decisions until mid-January. So our understanding is that the governor is going to make his budget address on January 18th, which will then be the first time that we'll likely see what the priorities are that the governor's office is putting forward, because right now they're just sort of putting all the different possibilities into the mix and trying to figure out what is the best state available funding source to support the various ideas that have come from all state agencies and departments. And then, as you heard, I missed the congressional delegation and federal update, but there's a lot of federal funds coming out the door. And I think every other day we're seeing, new federal opportunities and Build Back Better programs. And so I think there's also a lot to keep track of on the federal front. So I'm not giving any specifics, but more just the lay of the land of where we're at the moment in the budget and legislative priority timeframe. So happy to answer any questions. Also, I can pass it to Laura and anyone else from our agency that wants to offer anything more specific from the programs that they manage.
I'm happy to give a quick update. So Working Lands Enterprise Initiative has done some decision making to date with their almost 10x larger appropriation this year than in previous years. So there's been some initial decisions made about service providers. And just this week, there was the grant conversations for meat, standard business, and producer association. So those applicants will be notified in the coming weeks about the status of their application. Farm to school applications have been decided upon, and those agreements are getting underway. So a great pool of farm to school applicants, quite robust amount of the early child care folks in there. So that was really good to see, and a nice outcome of a federal grant that Trevor Lowell, who's the farm to school program manager, has been working on with Cynthia Green from Shelburne Farms on to increase that population's connection to farm to school. And trying to think about other programs, we've had a whole marketing team turnover in the past 6 months. So many of you knew or worked with Lauren Masseria who was our marketing and export program team lead. She has moved to a new position at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And then we filled that position with Emily Lepuski as the lead supervisor for that team. And then we had a temporary staffer for a few months assisting with the Big E, and we filled that position with somebody who's going to be events focused. Her name is Kristen Workala, and I'm sure some of you will get to know and work with Kristen soon. She's been on for about a month. And yeah, so that team's undergone some changes, but really excited about where we're going to go with marketing and events going forward. And then in the Dairy Business Innovation Center, we just received our third round of funds. So we're working with $12.7 million at the moment. We have awarded out just under $4 million over the course of 2020, which feels kind of amazing. Catherine Donovan, who's the program coordinator for the Dairy Innovation Center, has been an incredible resource. And we've got a team of staff that's working part-time on that as well. And we actually just posted another part-time position. So I'll put the link to that job in the chat for somebody to help with grantee stewardship and award management. So that position's under recruitment right now. Yeah, and the Dairy Innovation Center has been leading in partnership with Britt Lundgren from Stonyfield Farms, a regional task force to respond to the Horizon market exit, along with in New York, primarily Maple Hill organic farmer contract cancellations. So we've had a really lively task force that's been working hard for the past 8 weeks to provide recommendations to USDA, and those will be made public in the early part of next week. So a lot going on, a lot of focus on dairy, but also a lot of focus on just food systems development in general.
I want to hold some space for questions, but before this we had I was talking with Betsy Rosenbluth, and she was coordinating with Trevor. So, and I think Trevor's on this call, so this might be a good time too to Trevor, if you have any additional farm to institution or farm to school updates or info that you'd like to share.
Trevor actually had to get off the call, so I've been deputized to give his update.
Okay.
So he wanted me to mention the expansion of farm to school into the early childhood education as being really critical and important. There's a tracking grant that's being funded from USDA Farm to School that's underway, that's developing a couple of different ways to track local food purchases from schools. And that is going to be really instrumental in helping schools meet their reporting requirements for the local incentive that the state has put into place and may continue to fund. So that's been a really excellent grant, fortuitous timing in a number of ways, in that the tracking mechanisms that the contractor is developing will be ready to go and support schools here pretty soon. And then I think the one other piece that he wanted me to note, and this is from Betsy, that Vermont Feed is providing technical assistance to any school nutrition program who wants to develop and document their local purchasing to qualify for the new incentive grants through AOE. So if there is anybody on there that's interested in that technical assistance, just to get in touch with Betsy or the Vermont Feed team.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Abby.
Jake,
yeah, go ahead, Abby.
Any update on the climate action plan? I don't know if there's anyone else on the call. I mean, I can give an update, but I don't know if there's anyone else on the call better positioned to than I.
It's right now. It would be you and me, Abby. I think.
Okay.
But I'm searching through just to double check here. See if I see any other.
Maybe I'll just do a quick start, and if anyone else, and then you can jump in, and anyone else, Jake. So for those that maybe haven't followed the Vermont Climate Action Plan, since it's been such a process and so many meetings and lots of engagement for many months, the Vermont climate action plan was submitted to the Vermont Climate Council on December 1st, which was the deadline to have the plan put forth, that included actions for emission reduction to meet the Global Warming Solution Act requirements. And I think the plan, which is a 4-year plan, included over 200 some odd specific action steps that were put together by the various subcommittees, and 64 strategies throughout the 26 different pathways for action. The committees are still meeting though, which I think was a or do now, which is to elevate some priority actions for funding over the next 3 years from ARPA. And so various subcommittees have gone through a rapid process of prioritizing which of those they wanted to lift up for priority consideration by for ARPA funding. And so my understanding was that the process was that the climate action plan needed to be adopted first and submitted to the Climate Council and to the governor's office before then strategies could be prioritized for ARPA funding. So that's my understanding of sort of where we are in the process. But Jake, as you sit on committees, I'm curious, anything you'd add.
Yeah, that was going to be the piece that I was going to add in was the ARPA. So yeah, our subcommittee, I'm on the Ag and Ecosystem subcommittee, which is focused on working lands, and we are meeting tomorrow to elevate like 2 to 3 priorities that we would submit to the full council for potentially ARPA funding. And there are a set of sort of 3 guidelines around it that it has to, the funding, to be eligible for funding, it has to impact low-income Vermonters. It has to be essentially infrastructure or something that will lead to job creation. And then I'm actually blanking on what the 3rd criteria is. But so yeah, I think there's a lot of compatibility with the recommendations that came out of the Ag and Ecosystem subcommittee, but the turnaround time is very short. And so we've got a couple of our committee members right now who are drafting things, and we'll be presenting that to the full subcommittee tomorrow morning. So if you are interested in hearing what those are, and the meetings are open for public comment and participation. So I would just encourage folks to listen in tomorrow, especially because that will be the focus of the meeting tomorrow. And then I think it's a little unclear to me just beyond this point in time, how long the subcommittee or subcommittees will continue to meet for, and what their task will be, as now the plan has been released in sort of an interim form. And so I see Graham. Yes, yeah, Graham, yes. Hopefully, if you haven't left already, my understanding is yes. So if you're there tomorrow, you'll have an opportunity for public comment and conversation.
And I think the 3rd criteria has to do with connection to tourism and its impact on the business sector, which is
Right.
then linking to COVID impacts.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, great. So any questions for the agency for Abby, Laura, or others who are on the call? If not, I was gonna go. I was trying to fit Graham in actually.
I'm still
Graham,
here, Jim.
Yeah. So Graham, go ahead. So we're going to turn to rural Vermont, and then I think I was going to go to Nofa and Maddie, and then Mariah. I know Mariah, VHCB had some updates to share as well. So go ahead, Graham.
Hey, everybody. My name is Graham, and I'm the policy director here at Rural Vermont. And I'll keep it quick because I have to go get my daughter. One issue that I don't think is on a lot of folks' radar is the cannabis rulemaking process for recreational cannabis in Vermont. And the Cannabis Control Board is releasing some of its proposals now, and the legislature will have a path ahead of them to entertain those proposals and come up with other ideas to contribute to the statute prior to that market starting this year. And rural Vermont, Nofa, so maybe Maddie can speak to this a little bit more. And we're going to coalition including Vermont Regional Justice Alliance and the Vermont Growers Association are calling ourselves the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition. We have a suite of recommendations that I think are really important for the agricultural community to consider in relationship to this. I won't go into it, but I'll just let you know that if you have questions about that, we'd be happy to talk with you more. Folks talked about the climate action plan. There's going to be some rulemaking with the agency around compost foraging with poultry and sort of small scale food scraps collection that's going on. So you can stay in touch with the agency and ourselves and about that, maybe the Vermont Composters Association and others as well. You know, you all talked about the Climate Council work, but there's also the Soil Health and Payment for Ecosystem Services working group for us all to be monitoring, keeping track of the work there. And maybe there's someone on this call who can speak more to that. There will be some healthcare legislation this year. So if you're someone who's interested in that, or you think it would be helpful for your communities to have more affordable, accessible, equitable healthcare, we'll try to keep you all updated. And what else? I think that's sort of all that I have immediately in front of me, and I got to run, but thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Glad I caught you before you had to go pick up your daughter. And so, yeah, Maddie, if you're on, and I know you also, we're getting to that point where we all have to start going to pick up the kids, so I'll turn to you as well.
Okay, I got a little time. I'm one of the lucky few that has nearby rural childcare. So I wanted to just share, Maddie Kempner, I'm the policy director at Nofa Vermont. It's nice to see and hear everybody. I wanted to give a little bit more of an update on the situation with Danone and their exit from the Northeast market. In addition to what Laura shared, folks may have seen in the news today that Danone made some concessions in response to a petition that producer groups had submitted to them a couple of weeks ago. And they responded to that petition with an extension of 6 months for those farmers' contracts. So now they have until February 2023 to decide if they would like to renew their contracts, which is really helpful for farmers that are in that position. They are also offering a kind of minimal severance pay to farmers for the last 6 months of their contract, including for folks who have already exited Horizon. So that's a $2 per hundredweight payment on top of the existing pay price that they're getting. And then they have gestured towards some sort of co-investment in infrastructure solutions for organic dairy in the Northeast. And we are waiting to follow up with them to learn a little bit more about that. So just so everybody's aware, those are some of the concessions that have been made, which is from our perspective, progress, but not everything that we would like to see, certainly. In terms of policy, I'm glad that Graham mentioned the cannabis rulemaking process. We are really jumping back into that. I'm just returning from parental leave, so we'll be working with the coalition on those recommendations in response to the rulemaking process. We also will be working more in the upcoming legislative session on the local purchasing incentive. And I'm glad that folks from the agency were able to give the update from FEED that they're working on really kind of on the ground assistance for school districts to roll out the local purchasing incentive. That's something that Nofa has been a part of as well through the Farm to School Network. And as far as kind of advocacy on that, the funding that was provided to support the local purchasing incentive last session of $500,000 was in one-time funds. So we'll be going back to try to secure more permanent funding for that incentive program this year in this coming session. And we're excited to just see that program roll out and see how school districts are able to implement it. We're also tracking the climate action plan and really working on wrapping our arms around that and working also to get more farmer and public input going forward into that plan. The Payment for Ecosystem Services Working Group, Nofa sits on that working group in the seat representing small scale diversified agriculture. So continuing to meet with that group bi-weekly, and we've had some really great research done by some folks at VLS on different payment for ecosystem services programs that exist around the world to try to help shape our discussions a little bit and inform us, which has been incredibly helpful. We've had some great presentations from farmer groups recently and individual farmers with proposals on how a payment for ecosystem services program could look in Vermont, which has been amazing to see that kind of farmer engagement. And then I'll just lastly on that, the conservation districts have done some really excellent work doing outreach with farmers all around the state, and they're compiling some of their the results of their outreach and research with farmers on payment for ecosystem services to be delivered to the group later this month. So that will be really informative. And then finally, we will have a lot of opportunities for you all, hopefully, to engage with many of these issues through our upcoming winter conference. And that's happening February 17th through March 5th. And it will be mostly virtual, but we're hoping to have some cozy on-farm gatherings this year with bonfires and hot cocoa, and gather, minimally in person in whatever ways we can. So get excited about that, and there'll be more to come on that soon. We also are going to be partnering with Rural Vermont again on Small Farm Action Days, which happen every legislative session. We'll be bringing farmers to testify in the State House on issues that are important to them, and hopefully providing some training for those farmers on testifying effectively. And I think that's it. And if I miss anything, I think Grace and Aaron are here and they can fill in any gaps.
All right, let's see. Let's test if there are gaps to be filled. We got a thumbs up from Aaron. I'm sure Grace is probably giving the same. Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, Maddie, you crushed it. That's, I think.
Appreciate the space to give an update.
Yeah, no, thank you. So yeah, any questions or discussion points that came up through Maddie or Graham's updates? And if not, I'm gonna go over to Mariah to talk about some things happening at VHCB. So I'm just gonna pause just for a moment before we do that. Or Mariah, and I think Callie is on the call. Yeah, there's Callie. Yeah. All right. So Mariah, I'll turn it to you, and then you can coordinate with your team as to what everyone needs to say. So go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jake. Appreciate it. And yeah, many thanks to everyone who's shared so far. Lots of interesting resources going on, and great to be back with you all. I work with the Farm and Forest Viability Program at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and we actually have a few folks on the call to share about a few of our different programs that we have going on. So I'm actually going to have our program manager, Callie Hastings, kick it off with discussing a little bit about our core programming that some folks may be familiar with, but just wanted her to give a little update there. And then we'll go on to Betsy McGavis, who can talk about our water quality grants, and then I'll wrap it up with a couple of our other special programs.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Callie Hastings. Yeah, so probably most of you know our programs, but just quick overview because we have room for enrollment right now. So if you know farm businesses or forestry businesses who are interested in getting enrolled in our program, there's still some slots for this year. But basically our core program is around in-depth one-on-one business planning. We have a team of about 15 different business planners and advisors that work directly with the farm and forest businesses. It's a 2-year planning process, and we work with our core service provider organizations, NOFA, the Intervale, UVM Extension, Center for an Agricultural Economy, and Land for Good. So they're actually the ones who have the boots on the grounds working with the farms out there. We can also do transfer planning and exit planning, and we can also do kind of lighter touch work such as cash flow or doing enterprise analysis. And we are doing, just on the note with Horizon Farms, we're working with quite a few of them. NOFA has been awesome in all of that, and Jen Miller and Sarah Flack are doing a ton of work with Horizon Farms. But if you have any additional contact with specific farmers, we've done a lot of outreach to all of them, but if there's anyone on your radar that you want to point in our direction, we can help them do grass-fed assessments, cash flow projections. If they're planning on exiting, we can help them do that more strategically. And I think those are the key things. I'll drop a link in the chat as well for our programs and our application. And if anyone knows of farms that are interested, they can contact me directly.
All right, hey folks, and thanks Callie for giving the update. from that side of our work, my name is Betsy. Like Callie and Mariah, I'm with VTHCB's Farm and Forest Viability Program. I, along with Aaron Guman, who's our program administrator, to help administer our water quality grants program, which is currently open for applications, and those are going to be due on January 21st. So those are awards for up to $40,000 for farms who are making on-farm, long-lasting capital improvements that are going to have a direct positive impact on water quality. So we fund a lot of things like manure management projects, manure pits, animal housing, as well as things to support no-till practices. This year we dropped our farmer match requirement. We used to have a 10% farmer match, but we still do require a 1-to-1 match for funding. So our funds are often paired with, as most of you, or a lot of you probably know, state and federal programs, BMP, SEEP, NRCS. So like I said, applications are open and are due on January 21st. We're going to be having an informational session if anybody wants to ask questions about eligibility or filling out the application, and that's going to be on Wednesday, January 12th at 4 p.m. So I'll add my contact, the water quality grants page of our website, and the informational session registration in the chat. And definitely feel free to reach out if you have any questions about the application, about the program itself, especially if you or if somebody you're working with is interested in applying. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Betsy and Callie. And yeah, I'll just round it out with some information on a couple other programs we have available. So currently we are still offering our COVID-related business coaching program as well, which is it has a lot of parallels with our longer term advising program that Callie was chatting about, but is kind of particularly focused on shorter term urgent needs with folks who are navigating COVID impacts. So that might look like applying to a relief grant program. There's currently a relief grant in the state of Vermont available, and I'll also drop a link in the chat after as well on a couple other resources, both in the state and at the federal level. Could also look like, coaching, helping to make pivots, assessing cash flow, looking at, what the options are. So that's been a really wonderful addition to our programming over a year now, which is a little wild. And then the other program that we have available as well is the Rural Economic Development Initiative. We call it Ready for Short. And that program is focused on supporting folks, really focused on small rural communities, which are under 5,000 people. But in particular, we can support working lands businesses, so farmers, added value food businesses, forest products businesses, things like that, with getting connected with grant writing assistance or other types of technical assistance to pull down complex federal grants. So really excited to be able to offer that program, and I'm the main contact there, so I'll drop some information in the chat on that too. But yeah, again, really grateful to be here and happy to answer any questions folks have at this time.
Awesome. Thanks, Mariah and team, Callie, Betsy. Yeah, what a great set of resources, and all of those have been shared, and we will also make sure to share all of this out in our follow-up communication. So at this time, that's sort of the end of the scheduled programming, but I do also see quite a bit of folks on this call that might have things they'd like to touch upon, because normally in these calls we would try to cover all topic areas of the food system. So I'm seeing like John Sales at the food bank is on. I'm also seeing Natasha, the Composting Association. So we've got some folks here that are covering other areas of the food system that we haven't touched upon. So I just want to open up the floor, and if folks have information they'd like to share or comments or questions, this is the time to do that. And we can either raise a hand or just unmute yourself, and you'll probably get the floor. John, yeah, so John, you've unmuted, so.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jake. Good to see everybody. I'll be quick, just a few things. One is, as some of you know, the food bank over the last couple of years has pretty significantly ramped up our local purchasing, and that's going to continue. We're also seeking some of those surpluses and that federal funding from the state legislature to be able to maintain that We've been at least $500,000 the last 2 years of local purchasing. It's going to be more than that this year, probably by a significant amount. I also want everyone to know there are a couple of jobs available on our website. I guess everyone has that, but one is maybe particularly interesting is to lead an innovation lab, food security innovation lab that the food bank is standing up and seeding it with some of the McKinsey Scott gift that we got. So looking for somebody, don't necessarily have to have a background in nonprofits or the food system. In fact, we're looking at the broad array of opportunities for programs that will have some impact on food insecurity and the root causes of that. And then, the Farm Bill's coming up with Hunger Free Vermont. We'll be keeping a close eye on that. And then the local food assistance purchase program, which was talked about some earlier. The food bank there's also extra TFAP money, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, the federal fund. So we're having conversations with Agency of Education and Agency of Ag about, the best way to deploy those funds and leverage them for the benefit of local producers here in Vermont, and also to get the food out to folks who might need it. I think that's all I have. Thanks, Jake.
Yeah, John, just a quick follow-up on the food lab. Is that a model that has been adopted elsewhere? And sort of what's just I think you mentioned sort of looking at root causes, but anything else to say about that?
Yeah, there are a number of food banks around the country that are hiring positions like this. And really, I think broadly what we're looking for are projects that would be larger in scope, something that maybe just a few more dollars or a few more pounds of truckloads of food aren't going to solve. The more challenging issues that keep people from getting enough food into their households. It's a 3-year position, so we don't necessarily expect it to be a long-term role. And the plan is to get 3 or 4 pilot projects up and running, in 18 months or 2 years, and then see what's working. And we're actively raising money to be able to scale some of those up. So something statewide, and really looking to not have our blinders on of what we do every day, but look more holistically and how can we partner with others in the state.
Great, thanks. Any questions for John or other updates that folks would like to share? There's so many people here that I would love to ask questions to personally, but I don't want that to take up everyone else's time. But yeah, the floor is open. I'll just keep it open for a couple more minutes here, if needed. All right, we've gotten to that part of the day.
Jake, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question for everybody. I really would love to hear from anybody else on the call who has things on their radar for the upcoming session. I feel like this would be a great opportunity to sort of share what folks are looking at.
Great question. Yeah, so what are other folks paying attention to or anticipating or have thoughts, concerns, interest in the for the upcoming legislative session? Or is this a political group? Which I doubt that's the case. So yeah, Katie just shared that for Hunger Free, she's having some tech issues, but excited about universal school meals and working on that in the next session. Helen Laban, we're hoping that food as a covered benefit in the QHP benchmark plan design might come up, but that looks like it won't. Helen, I actually, can you speak maybe a little more to that?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't very good at typing that in a clear way that wasn't geeky. And I apologize, I don't have video on. I confess, I'm wrapping Christmas candy while I listen and talk. But that was the analysis of essential health benefits and whether there might be coverage for food as treatment for diet-related chronic conditions, usually type 2 diabetes or congestive heart failure are the examples of that. So there had been some thought that in the analysis of the update to that plan, so that would be the benchmark that qualified health plans are built off of that are sold on the exchange, that might be entered into that analysis, but it looks like that's not going to happen this year.
Okay.
Did that explain it?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's helpful. And any particular reason why, and anything that, are there any guarantees that it will happen in the following year, or are there things that need to be done to make sure it does?
I think just asking is the thing that needs to be done. The reason why not is that we would be the first state to cover it in that particular context, and there's questions about whether or not we're positioned to do it at scale. There are other states that are further along in Vermont on integrating food as part of healthcare that legitimately are more capable of delivering on that sort of payment model. And so I like Vermont to always be first in everything, but it is a valid argument that this might not be the time that Vermont should be first. So that was, I think, the main issue.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks. All right, I'll hold in silence for one more minute to give other folks a chance here, and if no one steps up, I think we can agree that we're at the end. We'll give it to 4:17 for more updates or questions.
This is Eric. I would encourage capital providers on the call to reach out to ACCB and just touch base.
Go ahead, Eric, and Buster, I'll get you next.
Just encouraging capital providers to reach out to ACCB and get in the loop on Vermont's plan for the State Small Business Credit Initiative. I'm not sure exactly what the status or format is at the moment, but there was a federal deadline of December 11th for initial plans, and there's a period until like February 22nd during which those plans can be adjusted. So just to figure out about implementation partnership opportunities and strategies across the 5 capital programs, it might be good to just get in the loop on that.
Thanks for that, Eric. And I think Buster, now would be the time.
I think he dropped off the call.
Okay. All right. So I think we'll call it at that. And thanks again, everyone, for joining. And yeah, please have a safe holidays. And hopefully, yeah, and we will see you next year. Probably first quarter will be the next anticipated sort of network-wide call. And yeah, we'll continue to kind of build out these agendas and kind of prep things beforehand to really structure it a little more, but also keep it free flowing and available for anyone to participate and chime in. So yeah, many thanks, and we will see you next year in at least in this iteration. So thanks, and have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks for hosting.
All right.